incident with the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans in Amsterdam is only getting more insane because last night they were targeted after their horrendous behaviour.
We had signs that basically said, say their names, tell their stories.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to the Struggle Video News. We'll start with some Zionist hysteria. There was violence in Amsterdam, Netherlands on November 7th. The first New York Times report says anti-Semitic attacks on Israeli soccer fans. Deborah Lipstadt, the U.S. Special Envoy to combat anti-Semitism, tweeted that there were attacks, quote, terribly reminiscent of a pogrom, unquote. But it was Judy Rudoren, the editor-in-chief of Forward, who took the cake. Her headline was, "Is it safe for a Jew to go to the Anne Frank house in Amsterdam?" There were attacks against people in Amsterdam wearing the yellow and blue colors of Israel's Maccabi soccer team. But let's look at the whole story. Israel's innocent soccer fans were not so innocent. Here they merrily go down the escalator saying, F the Arabs. Before the game, during a moment of silence for the hundreds killed in Valencia, Spain by floods, the pro-Maccabi soccer fans violated the gesture by jeering and shooting off fireworks. On returning to Ben Gurion Airport in Israel, the Israeli soccer fans again sang the racist song. Here are the lyrics translated by an Israeli anti-Zionist. If the F word bothers you, look the other way. A passionate TikTok about the matter from a young man named Chris.
The incident with the Maccabi Tel Aviv fans in Amsterdam is only getting more insane because last night they were targeted after their horrendous behaviour, and instead of maybe considering why UEFA let a country which is currently committing genocide and ethnic cleansing against Palestinians and whose football league is filled with racist teams who pride themselves on not employing Arabs, well, instead of dealing with that, of course, Zionists and Western media are pretending that this is somehow similar to the extermination of Jewish people in Europe in the 1930s and 40s. And I am sorry, this is ridiculous and it diminishes the legacy of these horrors because these people were not targeted on the basis of their Jewishness. They were targeted because Maccabi Tel Aviv fans are violent hooligans who were rampaging through the streets of Amsterdam, attacking people, tearing down flags, chanting about there being no children and schools left in Gaza, saying let the IOF win so they can fuck the Arabs, and other just horrors. These people need to be banned from international football. The blame is squarely with UEFA. This isn't some anti-Semitic outburst against Jewish people that came from nowhere. This comes from the racism which permeates Israeli society and the way in which this spills over whenever Israelis travel to other countries. And as I say, UEFA is to blame, because this isn't even the first incident with Maccabi Tel Aviv fans. In March this year, they beat a Palestinian man unconscious in Athens before their game with Olympiacos, and yet instead of dealing with them, UEFA lets this group of people who celebrate genocide and violently attack those who oppose it continue going around Europe to do more celebration and then expects people not to react. This is farcical and ridiculous, and the way in which it is being framed, as I say, is just disgusting.
Of course, with all the ridiculous claims that Jews in Europe are facing another Kristallnacht, the facts that Palestinians are being blown up by the scores daily in Gaza is being ignored by the Western corporate media. I spoke of Radoran, the editor of The Forward, earlier. I do want to mention that The Forward also had a very interesting article about voting patterns of U.S. Jews in this election based on polls. 62% of Jewish voters would support the United States withholding shipment of some weapons to Israel unless Netanyahu agrees to a proposal for an immediate ceasefire. This is very significant and I think unprecedented. Another major shift was increasing support for Trump among Orthodox Jews. They only make up 9% of the U.S. Jewish population. They voted 86% for Trump, way up from 59% in 2020. This when Jews as a whole voted for Harris by over 70%. So there's a marked split within the Jewish community that's very encouraging, and we should be happy about it. Now from a 40-minute interview I did with Mark Colville. We talked about his trip to Palestine and also about his efforts for the unhoused. This week we talk about Palestine. I'll be speaking to Mark Colville, a longtime human rights activist and advocate for the unhoused. He's part of the Amistad Catholic House. I believe we last spoke before or after he was imprisoned in 21 for his anti-nuclear war protest. Good afternoon.
Hi, Stan. Good to see you again.
I hope we can talk about both your recent trip to Palestine and your work for the unhoused and how they might connect. Let's start with Palestine. How many times have you been there?
Well, this past August into September was my second visit there. I was there 15 years ago in 2009 after another Israeli assault called Operation Cast Lead, in which, among other things, white phosphorus was used on the civilian population in Gaza. But yeah, 15 years later, I went back to find a more horrifying situation, actually.
What prompted you to go at this time, this last few months ago now?
Well, the easy answer is that I was invited, and I was invited by a Palestinian Center of Liberation Theology, which is called Sabil. Sabil, I believe, is the word for the way. And so again, this is a Palestinian Christian organization. And they've been conducting these kinds of delegations and tours, which for the purpose of witnessing the violence and the factors around it, and also, it's a work of accompaniment for people, international accompaniment for people who are in grave danger, so the presence of the international communities is crucial to their safety at this point. And so, I was responding to that invitation because, like many of my friends and many of us in the country here, we're just horrified and feeling paralyzed in terms of being able to do something about this genocide that our government now is actively colluding with Israel in committing. So when the opportunity to join that delegation as an interfaith delegation. The main groups were Christians for ceasefire, rabbis for a ceasefire, and then a collective of Hindus and Muslims and Buddhists as well. So we were kind of trying to bring the core message of all these faiths, which is peace and reconciliation and community and hospitality, that we wanted to bring a strong international faith-based presence into this context. And it turned out to be quite a group of very solid individuals. very gifted people, and some of them were, clergy members. Not all of them, but quite a few were. An international genocide expert who has studied genocides all over the world, and has been very influential at the UN. Was on the trip as well. So people were documenting this, the experience from their own both personal and professional perspectives, and turned out to be a very strong, not only presence, but then we also were able to make some public protests.
Now, this is the West Bank, right? You didn't get into Gaza.
Well, we went to the Gaza border, and we prayed there, and we helped load some of the aid trucks that were making the crossing into Gaza, and which were subsequently attacked by the Israeli armed forces as they were trying to deliver food in there. Yeah, but no, we weren't able to get into Gaza. Similar to 15 years ago when we had brought hundreds of $1,000s worth of medical supplies. You may remember that you and I talked after that trip as well, and we ended up praying at the same border, actually, on the Egyptian side, at that point, and then having the medical supplies ultimately smuggled into Gaza. So Gaza remains an open air prison, and of course now it's a concentration camp in which people are being exterminated and starved.
Yeah. So how did you get into the West Bank physically? Where do you go?
Well, I flew into Jordan, met some people there, and it was about an hour's drive in over the bridge there, the Jordan River, and into East Jerusalem. So we arrived in Jordan, and then the next day crossed over. I guess that would have been about the 26th of August, and we stayed for about 10 days. It was a very full trip. Actually, the getting into Jerusalem or crossing that border was probably the most touchy situation. The low level harassment that goes on at that border is kind of notorious. In fact, there was a young man from Britain who is a local politician. I think he's a member of parliament, if I'm not mistaken, in Britain. We were standing in the line at the getting processed by the Israelis to get in, and it was a long wait, and we're just kind of everybody standing around, and so this young man kind of absentmindedly took a picture of his traveling companion while they were standing in the line, and he was descended upon by Israeli soldiers and interrogated for about a couple of hours. Actually, we waited, and ultimately was not allowed into the country simply for having snapped a photo of his traveling companion as they were standing in the line. Wow. So the tension and the arrogance and the infliction of pain and aggravation on people is just so routine. It seems in every place we went on the part of the Israeli state.
Did you personally have any problem? Did they see your name in a list as having been there 15 years ago? Anything like that?
Thankfully, no. And again, that was a point of real tension for me. I was questioning internally whether I would even be able to get in. But yeah, I didn't have any problems with that. We spent during all that time, we were constantly crossing through checkpoints on this. We had a bus. There were 29 people on the delegation, and so we were traveling around on buses and going through these checkpoints. And on occasion, the soldiers would come on to the bus and just kind of ask for. Well, they would just inspect the bus, and I witnessed this twice. Okay, the soldiers would stop at the people of color that were on the bus and demand their passports. So the only people that were asked whose passports were demanded were African Americans on the delegation, and then there were a couple of U.S. based Palestinians who were on the trip, but nobody else was asked for their passports.
Yeah. So where are the places you went in the West Bank, and what did you see?
Well, again, it was a full experience, and led by one of the directors of this organization, Sabil Omar Harami, who's quite a very dedicated organizer and activist and liberation theologian there, who and also quite a comedian. He kept everything very light in an extremely tense situation. But we traveled all around the West Bank into a bunch of different communities. Now the geography now of Palestine is so much different than it was 15 years ago in terms of its progression, the progressive theft and confiscation of land and the expulsion of Palestinian communities from the places where they've lived for millennia. And what we have now in the West Bank is essentially a bunch of several small communities, Palestinian communities that are at this point only connected by roads, which the IDF routinely shuts down arbitrarily and at their will. And so the connection or Palestine as a contiguous place now or community in terms of Palestinians, it no longer really exists. It's a bunch of disconnected or communities that are easily disconnected. One of the communities that we visited just outside of Jerusalem was a place called the Tent of Nations, which lots of people are familiar with it. It's now become an international gathering place. It is actually a farm that again has been owned by one family for millennia, going back, I believe, to the 600s or something like that.
Wow.
So this family, and they explained their story to us. The land confiscations go on unmitigated, and a lot of that is through legal processes that are completely corrupt. These folks during the Ottoman Empire, the people were obliged during the Ottoman Empire to get legal documentation for their land, and very few families apparently did that at that time. However, this family did, and they were able to recover those records and thereby stave off these court battles that have gone on to try to confiscate their land. Lots of it has been confiscated already. They're under an order not to build anything, so they do sometimes they build underground structures in order to house themselves and such. But they've been able to remain on the land. And again, as they literally said to us, their only protection at this point is the anger of the international community. And so we visited there and other places under similar kinds of threats. It's important to understand, and I kind of you get the sense of this immediately when you start visiting these places, is that what we have here is that there's the violence. Actually, this genocide scholar who I mentioned, his name is Mang Zarni. I hope I'm pronouncing his full name correctly. A Malaysian brother who and he, the way he described it, and this has actually been sort of picked up by the United Nations in some of their analyses. But he describes like a network or an environment, what did he call it? International kind. I'm looking for the term here.
No problem.
Yeah, it's an ecosystem of genocide. Okay, and what he meant by that, what he means by that, is that on the ground you have these so-called settler communities, these illegal, they're essentially vigilante communities on stolen land. They build these gated communities that look very much like something you'd see in Mar-a-Lago here. They build these communities all over the stolen land of the Palestinians, and they divert all the water there, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, there's the fringe extremists, and of course the settlements are made up of extremist communities. But the fringe of these communities tends to be, a lot of them are veterans who have trauma, as Israeli soldiers.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are carrying trauma and PTSD from all of the atrocities that they've been involved in. And so, some of these folks become violent vigilantes, and they constantly, they burn cars, they terrorize children, they hassle women, and they do it all with impunity. And the Israeli army soldiers, the active soldiers, are right there, opening the gates for them, protecting them as they're committing these atrocities and violence against Palestinian families. And then any response from the families or from the people being victimized by this is met with brutal force by the army. So all of this is being, the illegal settlers are just terrorizing people with not only with impunity but with complete support of the Israeli army and the government.
And from an interview I did with Harry Soloway of Jewish Voice for Peace Westchester about an event they held, a 4-day event memorializing Palestinians killed over the last year. I'll be speaking to Harry Soloway, one of the leading voices in Jewish Voice for Peace Westchester, and that's Westchester County in New York State. He's the coordinator of the group. Good morning.
Good morning, Stanley. Nice to talk with you.
So JVP Westchester had a 4-day-long action last weekend. Could you describe it?
Yeah, actually, it was not JVP Westchester. We were part of a coalition of groups, of organizations that organized this 4-day event. I can give you the names of the groups if you like. It's
sure.
Westchester for Palestine, Jewish Voice for Peace Westchester, We United, Black Alliance for Peace, Westchester Muslims for Palestine, and the Ahmed Program and Teaching Palestine.
Good. So what happened? What did you all do?
So we decided that we needed to honor the names of all the martyrs, the people that have been murdered in the current genocide, not only in Gaza, but also in the West Bank and now Lebanon as well. So we decided to go around the clock, 4 continuous days from 9 in the morning until 9 at night, and a very solemn reading of the names of the people that have been martyred over the last year. We had roughly 80 people that came out to read names.
Mm.
We had people stop us on the street and ask if they could read names as well.
Really? Interesting.
It was a very moving and solemn occasion.
So how many names approximately were read?
In the 4 days, we read about 12,000, a little bit over 12,000 names. Of course, it's a small fraction of the number of people that have been killed. Certainly, I think the Gaza Health Ministry now is saying 44,000, but we know that number is a lot higher. But we were able to get
because of all the people who died from illnesses or buildings falling on them, people that can't identify.
Exactly. Some statistics have it as high as 180,000 people that have been killed. But we felt it was important to honor the people, not to let them perish in in vain and without realizing that those were souls whose lives deserved to be fully lived, whose lives were taken away. We read the names of infants, we read the names of children, we read the names of teens, adults, and elders in Gaza. We read the names of journalists that have been killed. We read the names of healthcare workers that have been killed. And we read the names of people on the West Bank that have been killed. Over the last year, we were not able to find information about those killed in Lebanon. I think it's too new.
And where exactly did this take place?
So all the groups are Westchester groups. We did the reading in a place called Renaissance Plaza, which is right in downtown White Plains. We've done many demonstrations there in the past. It's a busy area. People pass by. It's near the government of Westchester. And in fact, we got a very positive reaction from people that passed through.
What did it look like? Signs, banners, flags?
We had the Palestinian flag flying the whole time, a large Palestinian flag. I think I sent you a couple of pictures that you might want to share with your audience. We had signs that basically said, say their names, tell their stories. And other people brought signs of individuals that have been killed, mostly children that have been killed. We complied with the police in their request. They had us take down our sound system. We weren't allowed to use the sound system. But other than that, we complied. We didn't. It was a non-arrest action. It was just to memorialize the people that have died. So it was peaceful, and there was really overwhelming support from people that passed through.
That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller for the Struggle Video News.